Fusion, the International Science Radio Show.
I'm Associate Professor Helen Georgiou. I work at the University of Wollongong, so that's in the School of Education there. I undertake research in science education and I teach into our initial teacher education programs.
Education is a controversial subject sometimes. Isn't it? Does it become a political football, particularly science education?
It definitely is, and particularly now that STEM education is very much a national priority. So not just for Australia, but internationally, you'll see STEM education is sort of the number one priority. So for the last 10 years, lots of different countries have introduced a range of initiatives to try and lift engagement into STEM and address some of the issues that we know are prevalent within STEM education. This is good. So this is good because it's a focus, but also whenever something is high stakes like this, there's obviously lots of different people wanting lots of different things. And so it's always a bit of a power struggle, I think, for different stakeholders to try and have their interests met, for sure.
Because I know that previously there'd been issues about the number of girls and women that wanted to get into the hard sciences not being very high, and there have been changes to the curriculum to sort of take that into account and try and encourage them, and then there was a pushback against that sort of thing. I read a little bit in your paper.
That's right. Yeah. So the curriculum is definitely and has always been a location for power struggles. And so the curriculum is a very political thing, with female engagement in the sciences. We know that it's not negative news across the board. Like young girls are still just as interested in science as young boys. And in fact, we have more women than men entering like the biological sciences at university and choosing those subjects at the senior high school level. But there is an issue with girls in the physical sciences and also in engineering and technology and mathematics. So the proportion of females that are choosing physics sits around 20%, which it's not great. And so something is going on there to turn away all of those girls. So we've been through a very interesting period in New South Wales where at the turn of the century, the state tried to address this problem of access into physics and looked at the research and saw that contextual syllabuses, contextual curricula were did have some benefits. So they were successful in increasing access to subjects that that did have access and equity issues. And so the curriculum changed to include things like historical developments of ideas. So one of those was from idea to implementation, where we track individual contributions to our theoretical understanding all the way to the development of technologies. So that was like the cathode ray tube, television and all of that. And so the introduction of that historical and social context was quite new. And that syllabus remained active for a number of years. And then recently we've gone back to a very decontextualised syllabus, which is what we've got now in New South Wales. So that's very much, what are the forces involved here and how does this thing move, and things like that. So we conducted a study just exploring teachers' perceptions of those two paradigms and what they think. And it was interesting, there's definitely a tension there. They recognise that much cleaner syllabus focused on core concepts. It's easier to assess, it's easier to teach, it's a much more coherent document. But they did also recognise that it does exclude different groups of people, not just women, but those with that are ELD, so have English as a second language or dialect, and just generally like those that, perceive that it's not for them or that it's too difficult for them.
Well, putting context is like you're putting the story of what you're teaching, and I would have thought that's something that would make it easier for the students, for any students to take up the information.
Yeah, and the teachers did agree with that, and many of them did say that they would talk about it anyway. I think what was just really evident in these responses was just how much of an influence the high stakes assessment had, the HSC. So those kinds of ideas are not easily accessible. So are you describing? Are you sort of just replicating? Like, it's difficult to sort of apply in the same way that you would using the equations of motion, for example, to look at this data to, solve for one of the
Mm.
prenumerals. So um, it was definitely something that they all valued, but it seems to have been squeezed out just because of this, very high stakes assessment.
So there's a tension between what's practical to teach and assess and the way that students naturally learn.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And so, what are some of the other things that they're trying to do to make it so that, well, so there's more female participation at older ages, and also just so that it's better for the students?
Yeah, so there have been lots of different initiatives. So curriculum reform is just one of them. The new syllabuses are starting to be rolled out now, really, from curriculum reform that has been ongoing for a number of years. And that reform hasn't necessarily been, I would say, I wouldn't say it's been informed by the same intentions as in 2000, where access was really sort of foregrounded. In this round, we're looking at more, they're looking at what they say is more evidence-informed approaches. So this is the focus on core knowledge, well sequenced and coherent documents in terms of curricula. And they've also introduced an element of application. So sort of at the
Mm.
end of each unit for our science syllabuses, there's a question of like, so how does this, how do forces, for example, apply to levers so that, students have the opportunity to be able to practice applying their knowledge to these new contexts and sort of understanding how technologies in the world around them actually work. But in addition to curriculum reform, there have been a range of different initiatives, particularly from the federal government, I think, just like grants and programs, just trying to get girls into STEM. I've got many colleagues that are working on programs that they take out to high school girls, invite them to the university. There have been so many wonderful things that are going on in that space. We're working on a project at the moment, which is part of the Women in STEM and Entrepreneurship grant program. And our program takes like a little bit of a different approach in that we're looking not at necessarily targeting junior high school girls, which is the intention of a lot of other programs. We're looking at increasing the capacity of primary school teachers to inspire and empower their students. And we're doing that because we know that primary school teachers do lack confidence in STEM, particularly like that science and technology, which is like the science and engineering equivalent at the primary level. And we think that that's very much like an untapped area. Not that many people are focused in that space. And we're developing workshops and engaging our pre-service teachers in programs to try and really get them excited about STEM, see it in a different way, and give them that knowledge and the skills to be able to inspire their own students. So that's been really exciting. It's one of the funnest, I would say, projects we've worked on because I've got to get involved in the actual like delivery of the programs to our pre-service teachers and our teachers as well. Yeah.
And is that involving sort of making things and doing things?
Yeah, and so been the nice part that it's not just science. So it's sort of couched in that STEM space, and we're very much using the makerspace at the university. So our university has a makerspace that is available to our students. My co-lead of this part of the project, John Roberts, runs that makerspace, and we've been developing with others a suite of workshops and activities that both pre-service teachers and teachers can engage in. And one that we've been able to take out to schools that has been really popular is the recycled plastics activity. So this is sort of centered on that notion, like the idea of sustainability, but also taking those matters into your own hands. We look at the recycling of milk bottle lids or just drink lids, which currently, if they're not attached to the bottle, can't be recycled in most plants, but with curbside recycling, because they're just too small and they just get lost in the machinery. So we collect those and then process those and then cut them up, melt them, and reform them into other objects. So our students are able to mold them we make these little spinning top toys, or they design like a little bag tag that they can personalize and choose their shape. And that's been really fun because it's the STEM. We learn about plastics, the different kinds of plastics, how the materials behave, the design, because they get to work with computer-assisted design, Tinkercad, to design their own labels, and then also the process of working with like really cool machinery, the laser cutter, our molds that we've made with 3D printer. And it's just a really, really fun activity.
That sounds amazing. I'd want to try it.
Yeah, you can. But the students are so creative, the color combinations they create and the little designs that they design is just like, they're just really cool. So it's so nice to see them being able to explore that at the primary school level.
That's amazing. And do they do, as well as making things, do they get to try little experiments to see what happens that they might not expect?
Yeah, so testing and evaluating is really an important part of the design process, and it's often the one that's left off in instruction. So once you kind of go through one cycle, this is the same for scientific investigations as well. You sort of do the investigation and then you get some result, and it's not quite what you expect, and then you sort of hand wave it and say, oh, but it should have been 9.8 and it's 10.1, but we'll kind of, there's some error in there. But that final step is really important, like making that change and seeing if we can get that result to be more accurate, or testing our product and seeing what we can improve. So we have like the testing step first, like prototyping is really important. We create their little designs on a Cricut cutting machine so that they can see them on cardboard before we actually go to the laser cutter, so for their final cuts. So it's a super important part of the process, that reflection and the prototyping and iteration.
It's a really important critical thinking skill, it seems to me, for them to reflect on what they've just done and whether there's a better way to do it and what they've worked out from what happened.
Yeah, definitely. And we've had such wonderful feedback from the students. We've done this activity both with our pre-service teachers and also, the students in the classroom, and we've collected data on their perceptions of it, their experiences. And I've been there in the makerspace when we've done these activities as well, and it's just such a huge transformation. I've been teaching now for so long, for 10 years in my current role, but I've been teaching really since I've left school, so much longer than that. And just to sort of see a student go from such hesitation, like just not wanting to walk anywhere near any of the equipment, to just like autonomously working in the space, helping others, providing advice, and then just talking about the transformation. Like they've just never done anything like this. And it was the one thing that they'll really remember from their university degree. It's just, it's so nice. It's such a nice thing to witness.
It sounds empowering.
I think it is. I think, and maker spaces were based on that notion. Like the maker culture is about empowerment. So it's sort of like looking around you and knowing that, yes, I can fix that, or I can design that, or I can improve that, or, I have a need that isn't being met, and I can actually work through a process to get there. And so I think it's great. Like you are seeing more women in like handy men or handy women videos, and women taking on like design tasks and challenges. And I think that's really wonderful, and I think maker spaces are really important for that, like just to give you that opportunity to explore and share, and yeah, just take things into your own hands a little bit more.
I think it makes such a difference to the way you think about the world when you have some hands-on with things, because especially you're talking primary school as well, when you've got that's when you're forming all sorts of ideas of the world, even when you're 8, 9, 10, you're still getting your hands on, gives you ways to think about things, but also repairing things. That's pretty amazing too, because so many people never learn even to sew on a button.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not that difficult, right? And it's sort of like, it's how I've always felt about science, really naively, because I loved science as a child. I completed my degree, I went off, I started teaching, and then I realized, wow, like not only do a lot of people not like it, but some people like it, but just aren't progressing with it. Like, there is a barrier there, there is something just preventing them from engaging, even though they're more than capable of
Mm.
doing that. And it's the same with, these technologies, and it's a simple process like drilling something, machining something, laser cutting,
Mm.
3D printing. Um, but and it opens up all of these possibilities, but there's just such a huge barrier for a lot of people to get into it in the first instance. So yeah, we're doing a lot of work to try and understand like what is it exactly that prevents them, what are they thinking that makes them not want to kind of push a little bit further, and then how can we help them to get there.
Yes, and there's sort of, would the schools be getting their own sort of laser cutters and 3D printers, or do they come to
Yeah.
University Makerspace or somewhere like that?
Yeah, for us, because we're working with predominantly primary schools, they are visiting the university, the teachers, which is also really great. But a lot of high schools do already have, most high schools that I visited, yeah, they do have 3D printers and the laser cutters. They've got their TAS departments now, so they're quite common. But a lot of primary schools also have 3D printers, and they're using more technology like the robots, like that you see lots of B-bots and Spheros, which we work with
Mm.
as well. And the Department of Education, at least in New South Wales, have a kind of like a collection of things that they lend out to schools, which is great. So they can like have them just for a term or so. So they are, not pervasive, but they are common now in schools, these technologies.
I wonder if it would also help if these sort of tools or makerspaces were available with public libraries so that it didn't have to be just through
Yeah.
a particular school.
Yeah, they are public makerspaces, so they are often in libraries because they offer a similar service, right? So, especially 3D printing is something that you'll see quite commonly in a local library. But a full makerspace is generally like
Yeah.
a standalone space. But there's different versions of it. So, um, there's like the sheds, like the men's sheds, I
Oh,
think
yes.
they call them, and there probably should be a less gendered name for
Yes.
them. But we've
Well, they
got
need something else, yes.
Yeah, we've got where I live, we've got a reverse garbage,
Oh,
which
yes.
is yeah, kind of like lots of little bits and pieces which you can, recycle and reuse.
Hmm.
And there's also like tool libraries, like lots of councils have got libraries of tools where you can go in and borrow, like a chainsaw or a
Yeah,
saw
like a
or a
library of things.
lawnmower. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So yeah, there's the thing there. There's things out there. Um, yeah, it's just kind of that getting that initial access. I think that sometimes,
Hmm.
yeah,
Well, I think if you learn some of that at school and you see that at school, you're more likely to go to your local library or your local council and ask them what they've got.
yeah, that's right.
But if you
Yeah,
don't know it exists because you didn't do it at school, you wouldn't even think.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're totally right.
And so, what sort of things do you think we aren't doing that maybe we should? Do you have some suggestions that for what we should be looking at next for improving education with science and technology?
Yeah, I think, one of the things with education is that it's just so difficult. Like they have this joke about how all educational researchers just finish off their papers with saying, and it's really complex. But it's true, like I came from a science background, it's not scientific research and it can't work in the same way as scientific research. I very much came into it with the view that we can undertake quantitative studies and they will give us all the information we need, kind of like randomized control trial, experimental setups.
Mm,
And it's just such a limited lens through which to understand what happens in education. It's necessary, but I think what the kind of narratives that I'm noticing now are very much like that sort of research will answer all of our questions and the problem is very simple, but it's not. It's a very complex problem that needs a whole range of different approaches to sort of get at it. And one of the papers I published last year looked at some of the media narratives around science achievement amongst Australian students. And that's really interesting because, for years we've heard that achievement has just been declining and that we're failing, as a nation, and our teachers are doing a terrible job, which is the implication. And this really alarmed me, which is why I undertook this research, which essentially kind of looked at more than the one test. All of this narrative came out of just the one test, which is the PISA, which is a test run out of the OECD. And it seems to have become the darling of
mm,
lots of governments. So it's attracted like so much more attention than any of the other tests that are out there. And there are other tests, like lots of other tests that our students hit. But because it's just been so prominent, the results from that one test just completely overshadowed any other results and achievements that we've been able to have. So I looked at Tim's and Tim's, in the same period, student achievement was increasing. And then I looked at the Australian tests. We've got a couple of Australian tests as a state test for New South Wales students. And there's also like a NAPLAN science version. So it's like NAP SL, scientific science literacy. And both of those tests have now also returned results that show that we've got basically stable results. So all of these other tests show quite stable results over a long period of time. And it was just that one period from 2006 to 2015 where we saw those declines in PISA. And the problem with that is it's not necessarily, I mean, it's the problem with that is that the narrative of failure is not great. It's not great for students or teachers who, do a really, really hard job every day and a really good job. But it also doesn't focus our policy efforts. So we're not targeting specifically a problem. We're just kind of looking at this huge result and sort of saying, okay, all different people are saying it's a completely different thing. So it's like the curriculum or its teachers and that just makes it hard to really target, what those issues actually are.
Mm. So, Helen, would you like to make a concluding statement? Because I know you're running out of time.
Yeah, um, I think that there's cause for optimism. I think, we put STEM on the agenda, and I think I've been fortunate enough to work in that space, which is a dream come true for me to be able to contribute back, give back. But I've also worked with so many other people that are just equally as committed, and that they've been doing such amazing things in this STEM space. And I think we are getting somewhere and things are improving. And I would just say, like, it's time to celebrate some things. So I think let's, congratulate students. Let's be happy for teachers. Let's just try and, I guess, just focus on those wins, because we have some wins, and it's worth focusing on.
Well, Helen, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ian. My pleasure.
And that's all from me, this time on Diffusion. Please remember to like and subscribe to help the algorithm show this interview to other people. Are you a scientist, artist, biohacker, or maker who'd like to be interviewed about your work? Would your company like to sponsor Diffusion? Send your contributions, opinions, helpful suggestions, and donations to science@diffusionradio.com or comment below and help the algorithm. I produce Diffusion Science Radio, a weekly science podcast which is broadcast around Australia on the Community Radio Network since 1998. Subscribe to the podcast on the Diffusion website at www.diffusionradio.com. That's www.diffusionradio.com, and check the website for links, photos, and videos about the latest show. And you can explore more than 1,300 previous episodes archived on diffusionradio.com, where the shows are labelled by keywords so you can focus in on the shows that you want to hear. Join my patrons at patreon.com/diffusionradio. Make a donation through paypal.me/Ian Woolf. Support Diffusion by buying from the Diffusion Science Etsy store. Catch people's eyes like flies. I have Hawaiian shirts, t-shirts, pullovers and mugs with many different Venus flytrap designs, based on my photographs from the Carnivorous Plant Society's plant competition winners. Check out the shirts and other Venus flytrap designs at diffusionscience.etsy.com. I'm Ian Woolf. Join me inside your device of choice for more science wondering next week on Diffusion Science Radio.
Study science, because you will find in the study of science a richer, more rewarding life.